Welcome to the New England Endurance Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Schenker, along with my co-host, Art Trapotsis.
Hey,
This is
hey.
the pod. Hey, hey. This is the podcast where we explore the incredible world of endurance sports across the greatest region of the country, New England. And today we're sitting down with an amazing person, a pioneer in the New England endurance community, none other than Karen Smyers. Karen is a world champion triathlete, an endurance coach, a local legend before there was a local legend on Strava. And we want to say welcome, Karen.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Hey, Karen. Hey, I don't know if you remember, but we first met. It was me and my wife, Jess. We had date night with you at Fast Splits. You were conducting some training classes. I believe it was Fast Splits in Newton, Mass.
That's right.
And
I remember well.
yeah, so there's nothing like tasty intervals with Karen Smyers on date night.
Are you still married? Just want to be clear. Like your date night was intervals at Fast Split, but you're still married, right? So
You know what? That kept our marriage together.
We've actually had people meet at Flash Splits and go on to get married. So, it's
Oh, wow.
not only a date night, but it's a good place to meet people.
That's awesome. So let me tell you a little bit more about Karen. So she was the 1995 Hawaiian Ironman world champion. She was the 3-time ITU world champion. She's in the USA Triathlon Hall of Fame and the World Triathlon Hall of Fame. She's competed at the top level of triathlon for 26 years. Now she coaches other triathletes, runners, and cyclists and organizes endurance events for adults and kids. For example, she founded the Lincoln Kids Triathlon, the Splash, Mash, and Dash in Lincoln, Mass. And we're going to dig into hear more about that. I feel like, Eric, we're in the presence of greatness today. How cool is this?
we absolutely are. I was saying we were talking beforehand that so many of our interviews have touched on triathlon. People have done triathlon. We've talked to swimmers, we've talked to cyclists, we've talked to runners. I think many of us have all tried or dabbled in triathlon. But to have Karen on this podcast is really, really amazing, and we're really thankful to bring this to the community. So, Karen, let's start with some basics.
Okay.
Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Wethersfield, Connecticut for the most part. I was actually born in Pennsylvania, but moved early on to Connecticut and grew up there, went to high school and everything, Wethersfield High. And but after college, I moved to the Boston area, started out in kind of Somerville, Cambridge, Medford area, and moved to Lincoln in 1992, Lincoln, Mass, that is, not New Hampshire or any of the other many Lincolns, and have been here since 1992. And yeah, I never really thought I was going to become a professional triathlete as a career, but somehow or other I fell into it, and I started triathlon in New England, and I just never really wanted to leave. It was a little bit unusual having a professional triathlete from this area, but I loved it here. I loved the change of season, and I think that actually probably kept me in the sport for a lot longer, because the change of season sort of makes you have to have a little bit of an off season, So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've loved it here, and never wanted to be one of those Boulder or California transplants.
Well, you're speaking the language of this podcast, so that's we'll get to that at the end. But what was your journey? So, were you a failed team sport athlete like many endurance athletes of today? Tell us a little bit about your journey into the endurance sports world.
Well, in high school, I was always interested in sports. So I come from a family of 7 kids, and all of us were always in sports. I was just always trying to kind of keep up to what my older brothers and sisters were doing. So I started swimming on the swim team because they did. I started doing gymnastics because my older sister did. I played tennis because they did, and even like I remember starting softball teams and field hockey teams in junior high because I just like to have a sport to do all year round. But in high school, I did swimming, gymnastics, tennis. And then in college, I ended up focusing just on swimming But by the time the swimming season ended in March, it kind of went September to March. I was like, well, what am I going to do from March to, to June? And so I ended up walking onto the track team. My college roommate was on the running team, and she's the one that kind of suggested it. So, I got a couple of months, a year on the running team there, and that kind of gave me a taste for it. And so then when I got out of college and finally didn't have an organized team to be on for the first time ever, I really at a loss. I was like, what am I going to do with myself? So that same college roommate, we moved to Boston together, and we both found a running club right away to be on called the Irish American Track Club. And it was perfect in terms of hard running workouts, but also a lot of socializing. Just kind of think steps forward, two steps back every Wednesday night when we would have our track and then have a few beers afterwards. But it was perfect for, first moving to a new city and getting to meet people. And it became, a big part of our social group. And that same friend, Kim, she found out about the sport of triathlon, and she did the Bud Light Boston Triathlon. It was in 1984. And actually, she did in 83, the summer of 83, summer we graduated, and she earned some prize money. And I was like, wow, that's the coolest sport ever. Like, I want to try that. So I started doing, training with her and entered some races the next year. And at that same Bud Light race in 84, I would have placed in the prize money, but they didn't call me up to get the money. And so after I went up to the race director and I was like, I think I beat that girl that, you gave the money to. Why didn't you call me up? And he's like, well, you didn't enter the pro category. And I was like, well, how do you enter the pro category? He's like, next time on the application, check the box that says pro. And so that's how easy it was to become a pro back then. And so from then on, I was like, sure, I'll do that. So that's how I started racing as a professional triathlete. I started checking the other box.
That is a great story.
That is such a great story. I don't know the fact that it was a Bud Light triathlon, though, for me
yeah,
is
totally.
also
I was looking for
fantastic.
races with beer sponsors. Yeah.
I guess that goes along with the Coors tour, out in Colorado or what have you. But the Bud Light Triathlon in Boston, that's a fantastic
There was a whole series sponsored by Bud Light. Yeah,
Wow.
it was a USTS. It lasted for many years back in the 80s. And they had a lot of prize money. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'd like to dig in a little bit to how the sports evolved, but I have sort of a fun question to ask you. You're a Hall of Fame athlete. I think you might be the first one on the podcast. And looking back over your career, what event did you love the most?
it's actually kind of changed over the years. I mean, I definitely loved swimming when I was swimming, and but I think I did burn out on it a little bit. And I kind of lived off my college swimming for the first many years of triathlon. And so it meant I didn't really have to train that hard because I was already in really good swim shape. And so I could just do a little to kind of keep it. And then, cycling was so new to me, and running was also a little bit new. And so I spent more time doing that. It's funny, the first 5 years that I was kind of racing triathlon, I had a full-time job, believe it or not. I worked at a computer consulting company in Boston. And so even though I was checking the pro box, I was still working 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, and trying to squeeze the training in. And it was more for fun than a career. Still, I was just having a ball doing it, and could use my lunch hour occasionally for an hour swim or a run sometimes. And I would bike to and from work sometimes. That was like 4 miles each way. But in any case, my biking took a really long time to get good. So I used to hate biking in the beginning, because I just felt like it was my worst for sure. And I would come out of the water near the front and then get passed by so many people. And you know how you just get so frustrated.
Yeah.
And there was no coaching back then. This was before the internet. And because the sport was so new, there weren't any triathlon coaches. So we were all learning kind of just by talking to other people that we'd run into on the road or, run into in races and try and mimic what they were doing. But there was just my only information about the sport was there was a triathlete magazine that came out once a month, and I knew this one little store near where I worked that carried the magazine, but they only got like 4 copies. And if I wasn't there the day or two it came in, it would sell out. So I would start visiting this store at lunch hour like every day for a week to make sure I got one of the copies, because that's how I got my information. So in any
Was,
case, a long answer to the thing. Eventually I grew to really like biking once I got better at it. And
yeah.
some of the things about biking that you could just see so much more of, the place that you live. You could really explore far away. And running, I love for the simplicity of it. So, and for a while when I was just out of college, I was getting better really quickly at running. I qualified for the Olympic trials in the marathon, and I had swum
Oh,
for how many years. I never qualified for an Olympic trials in swimming. And I put way more work into it. So
yeah.
I think I was maybe better suited to running. But, at the same time, I look back and I'm like, if I hadn't done the swimming when I was a kid, I never would have been the triathlete that I ended up being. So I think it all worked out pretty well.
Was there a race that was near and dear to your heart over the years you love doing?
There's a whole bunch of them that are near and dear to my heart, but around here, the Bay State Triathlon was a really cool race. It was held in Medford and Stoneham. I was around Spot Pond. You swam in Wrights Pond and then biked around Spot Pond. But it was one of my first breakout races because Dave McGillivray put it on, and he invited some professionals to come. And so I got to race the people that I read about in that magazine, like Colleen Cannon and Beth Mitchell, and there was even this girl Allison Rowe who. I think she won the Boston Marathon, and she had just taken up triathlon. And during the first time I did the Bay State, we started the run together, and I outran her on the run to win the
Ooh,
race. And there's a really cool picture of the two of us running together. And so that was kind of a huge deal for me, because that was in '85. I was still pretty new to the sport. But it really gave me an idea that maybe I could do this thing. So I did that race 6 more times, I think. And it actually eventually also got some Ironman qualifiers. So back when you could qualify for the Hawaiian Ironman, through not doing a full Ironman, the Bay State it was less than a half Ironman distance. It was like a 4 mile swim, 40-mile bike, and 10-mile run, I think. And there were slots to qualify for Hawaii, and a whole bunch of my training partners in Team Psycho decided that they were going to try and get spots. And so did my husband. And you can only qualify as an amateur. So I was a pro, so there weren't spots for me, but whole bunch of them qualified. And I had told Michael beforehand, I'm like, all right, if you qualify for Ironman, then I'll do it too. And I had, up to that point, always said, I'm never doing Ironman. That's crazy. So anyway, he and my sister and a few of our training partners all qualified. And so all of a sudden I'm like, wait, if I'm going to Hawaii, I'm not going to watch. I got to do it too. So I had to scramble and find a way to qualify so that I could also do my first Ironman. Yeah, that's I found Dave McGillivray managed to find me a way to qualify through a different race, and so
what year was that?
So that was 1993.
Okay.
So your first Ironman
hmm
was 1993,
Yeah. So I'd
and
been
you
doing triathlon
won,
for 9 years before I decided to do my first Ironman.
Hawaii Ironman World Championships in 1995.
Right. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had a pretty good endurance background by then,
Yeah.
although I have to say, I remember so vividly, a whole bunch of us that had all qualified. I remember us decide, okay, we got to start doing long training now. Let's do our first century ride. And I remember there were 6 of us, and we all went out and did this 100-mile bike ride, and we did it from my house. And I remember coming back into my house and collapsing on the living room floor, and just all of us going, oh my God, how are we going to run at all after this, never mind a marathon. Like we were so tired and beat. And it was an eye-opening experience. And but it's funny how you just start to adapt, mentally and physically. And at the
Mhm.
time, training for, you know, 3 hour events instead of 9 to 10 hour events, I just never had a reason to do more than a 3 hour bike ride. And so, stepping it up like that, it was just such a shock to the system. But, you know, now well, I'm in much less shape than I was, but now I'm like, oh yeah, 100 miles. Yep. You can do it.
Yep.
So it's funny
Could
how
you,
things change.
yeah, could you take us through a little? I think we all want to know just a little bit about that Hawaii Ironman World Championship experience, and maybe just some of your thoughts and memories from that incredible day.
Yeah. Well, so, when I did it that first year in 93, there were a whole bunch of us from New England that were, or Team Psycho particularly, and my sister qualified and my husband. So we were all staying together and kind of the blind leading the blind. So I remember my first one that my nutrition plan was that I thought, I knew what I could eat and drink on the bike ride because we'd had to do a bunch of, those 100-mile rides. But for the run afterwards, I had in my head that my stomach's really finicky and I'm not going to be able to take in anything during the run. So I'm just going to have to live off what I had on the bike. And so I was just going to drink water. I don't know how I could have
Oh my
possibly
God.
not known that that was a bad plan, but believe it or not, that was what I thought I was going to do. And I actually ran pretty well for like 7 or 8 miles. So like an hour of running off the bike on water. And then I remember all of a sudden just hitting the wall and not realizing what was happening. I thought I was just not trained enough. And I remember all of a sudden just, going from like the Energizer Bunny running out of battery. And I was just all of a sudden like, bloop, bloop, bloop. And I was like, wow, this is a lot harder. And I realized, boy, I better train more next time,
You were bonking.
kind of, yeah, it was just sort of like, wow, what do I do? And then I finally, out of desperation, I was like, well, the one like piece of advice I'd gotten was, you can drink Coke, but don't do it till the last 10K because you'll have all these ups and downs or something. And so I was like, I think I better just try this because, I'm in trouble here. So I took a big cup of Coke and sure enough, I could run, but it wasn't enough to get me all the way to the next mile. I mean, I was so deprived at that point. So I got to about a half mile and I like, slogged my way walking and jogging into the next aid station. I'm like, where's that elixir of Coke? And I took another big one. And then the next time I managed to run about 3/4 of a mile before I faded. So it took me like 3 or 4 aid stations in a row to get enough Coke in me to finally run from aid station to aid station. And then that's what I was able to do the rest of it. So I ended up, learning a lot that first time. And, so this, and I finished fourth, so I did okay. Gave me the
Wow.
idea that, with a little more practice and experience, I ought to be able to maybe get in the, top three. So I went to the next year with a little better nutrition plan. And,
And could I ask? I got to ask, what was the nutrition? So in 1994, 95, is it Power Bar and Gatorade, or what was?
I know for sure I was eating Snickers bars on the bike, and I think they did have the first generation of gels. I forget what they called them back then, like Lepin or something like that. There was the very first ones that were out, and so I probably had some of those as well. Definitely Gatorade because that was what was on the course. And but for sure, the run I switched to just Coke. I was like, that stuff is amazing. So I pretty much always planned on, yeah. And I would bring, I can't remember at what point I learned to bring electrolytes like salt tabs or whatever. Something called Succeed is what I always used. And but I have to say, I never quite figured my nutrition out 100% in the Ironman distance. It's still a bit of my Achilles heel. But second year, I definitely did better and managed to run more of the marathon than I had that first time. But I still kind of faded and felt like I didn't have the best. I did finish second though, so I moved up. But I started to get intrigued now. I was like, this is an interesting puzzle to figure out. And if I can get it right, I think I could do pretty well. And so going into 95, I'd been second. So the only way to move up is first, but I had to beat Paula Newby-Fraser, who was the 7-time
Yeah.
champion and had won both the 2 times that I had done it, and killed me the first time, and I got a little closer the second, but still not really close. But I kind of had hope because I knew I could race her in the shorter distance. So I was like, I know I have the ability. I just need the experience at the long distance, is what I was telling myself. And she had announced she was retiring after the 95 race. So I thought, oh, this is my last chance to actually try and beat her, So that was kind of high on my awareness in going into that race. And we usually swam pretty close. In this 95, we swam together, and I started the bike, and I was just like, use her for her experience and pacing, just stay behind her. Don't do anything stupid. So for 25 miles, I shadowed her very legally. And then all of a sudden we hit a really tough headwind, and she started to get away from me into the wind. And at one point I felt like I was doing like a 40K effort to try and keep up. And I'm like, I just can't bike this hard when I know I still have 90 miles to go. And so I had to kind of let her go. And so she ended up, but I kept telling myself, don't let her get more than, a minute, because then you can catch her on the run. And then I was like, well, maybe 2 minutes. And, then I'd get a split. I was 3.5 minutes. I'm like, well, maybe you can catch up that much, but no more. And so I was playing these mental games with myself the entire bike as she kept building a huge lead. And she eventually got to 12 minutes. And when I got off the bike. And
Wow.
I could tell you tons more of the story, but it goes, I'll make it a little short. In any case, I kind of told myself, you know what, just get as close as you can. See if you can outrun her by 30 seconds a mile, because I had done that the year before for the first 8 miles, and then I kind of faded. And I'm like, you're in better run shape. See if you can do that. 8 miles in, I got word that I'd made up 4 minutes. And I was like, good, keep doing that. Next 8 miles. Well, I think she also was getting word that I was, making some progress. So she made some errors and stopping at aid stations the way she normally does. And it eventually really came back. She ran a little faster the second 8 mile. I didn't catch up as much, but it started to haunt her, and that she had nutrition troubles, and came down to, I think there was 1.5 miles to go, and I was told I was 1:40 behind. And so, I made up a lot, but I hadn't seen her since mile 20.
What kind of splits were you doing up until this point?
Well, I ended up running a 3:05. So I was
Nice.
running, just over sevens.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I ran faster in the beginning or not. To be honest, there was no Garmin's or anything back then, so we weren't timing ourselves.
So what happened that last mile?
So the last mile, I was like, well, she can hear the finish line. Like, there's no way. But I'm like, what the heck? And I just was giving it my best, like, get closer, just make it a race, And finally, with about a half mile to go, I finally caught sight of her taking a turn. And I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest race ever. I can see her. And so I ran up, and there's a shot of me coming around this corner. And I feel like my eyes are like this, like, where is she? Where is she? Because she'd gotten out of sight. And I was like, I'm going to be sprinting down a Leahy Drive next to Paula Newby-Fraser. Like, even if I can't beat her, this is the coolest thing ever, And so, but as I came around the corner and thought I was sprinting, in the TV shows, it looks like I'm jogging, but I was like, that's my sprint. But all of a sudden I closed on her really quickly. And just as I was about to pass her, she actually put her hands on her knees and kind of like stumbled sort of. And so she almost fell into me, and I kind of like tapped her on the back and ran around her and looked back and just sort of said, good job. And then was like, go, go, go. But, that was with a 1/4 mile to go. So I was like, I got to the turn on a Leahy Drive, the final stretch. And, this is before, cell phones or anything. So the announcers are like, and here comes Paula Newby-Fraser, because they hadn't gotten any,
Oh
up.
my.
I'd passed her. And so after a few minutes, they're like, wait a second, that's not Paula. They're like, wait, I think this is Karen Smyers. And so, the whole last stretch, I'm looking behind me going like, what happened to her? Because I didn't really know what was going on with her. but she turns out she was really having trouble with lack of nutrition and was having trouble even keeping a straight line. And after I passed her, she walked to the corner and then she sat down and just felt like she couldn't continue. I went on, went up and won the race and waited for her, and she's not coming. She's not coming. I'm like, she was right there. I don't know what happened. And so finally, I saw her husband, Paul, well, at the time, fiance, I think, Paul Huddle, runs back because he gets word she's laying on the ground. And he gets that. This is all on TV. So I'm seeing this later, that she's saying, I think I'm going to die. And he runs up and he's like, call 911. What's wrong with you people? Anyway, it was very, very dramatic. But she ended up getting kind of control and able to walk to the finish line. So she walked to the finish and by that point was in fourth. 20 minutes later, still finishes fourth.
Wow.
And then decides not to retire. So she comes back the next year and beats me again. So, but anyway, so that was a very, very dramatic finish. I did not have even time to realize that I was actually winning the race or, think about what I was going to do at the finish line. I kind of finished, I looked sort of stunned, like, I can't believe that just happened. Sorry, I'm using up all of our time, like going into very minute detail. I'm sorry I do that sometimes.
No, listen, my heart rate is elevated just listening to the story. This was Eric. How cool was that story?
Freaking unbelievable. I just love it. And I am a fan of Coca-Cola. I'll tell you that true. Like, I mean, it is
Really
that is
is
a
magic.
magic elixir.
I agree.
Karen, are you still competing?
So I am not really competing anymore, not by choice necessarily. So I held on to my pro license till I was 50 years old. I was still racing pro. I could still get in the money. I mean, I was definitely on the downside of the curve, but I was never one of those people that cared if I, went out at the top of my game. I'm like, this is the best lifestyle ever, and I'm going to make it last as long as I can. And so I was like, if I can still earn money doing this and it's like being paid to do my hobby, like, why wouldn't I? So, but when I turned 50, I started having some issues with my breathing, that I was coughing up blood during my races, which I know it sounds ridiculous. And it was. So it would only happen on the run portion of a triathlon. And but I started having a lot of trouble not being able to catch my breath, feeling like I was at altitude all the time. And I was like, something is definitely wrong. And I started, going to specialists. I went to pulmonologists, and I saw a bunch of different cardiologists. I did a whole bunch of stress tests. And basically, it took me 10 years to get a diagnosis. I finally got a diagnosis over the pandemic, because I would sometimes give up because people would be like, I think you're crazy, because I could never mimic the symptoms exactly, like where I'd get the blood. Um, and they just, everything they tested, they're like, nope, you're normal. But they finally found out that I have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with an obstruction, which is it's a kind of a genetic heart disease. It's not something that you develop for. It's not like athlete's heart, like what you read about all these other endurance athletes having trouble with their heart. It's nothing related to that, but it's a thickening of the left ventricle. And in my case, I also have an obstruction when I exercise, and the blood pressure goes up, and the volume of blood I'm pumping, the valve closes down, so I don't get a full emptying of the left ventricle, which means I also don't get a full refilling of it. So my VO2 max, it's almost about half what it used to be, and it's not very fun to race when you have that restriction. So I have trouble running without having to walk most of the time. So yeah, I've tried doing some. I do some fun events where I can, walk when I want and I won't care. So, like, I did Sea to Summit last year, which is mostly a walk. You hike up Mount Washington at the end. I was like, oh, good. I walk my runs anyway, so this would be perfect. But it turns out that hiking up Mount Washington takes a pretty good VO2 max, and so I was a little bit limited. But it was very fun. I'm really glad I did it. It was very cool. So I look for events like that because I can't stop wanting to do competitive events, but I know that to just do something where I have to walk on a 5K is not very fun.
This is a question just to kind of satisfy my own curiosity, but how would you train today differently than you did back in the 80s and 90s? Like, would you use a power meter these days? And I'm just curious how you would go about your training, having so many years of experience.
Yeah. Uh, I would definitely use a power meter because I think that's like one of the best things you can use to actually tell yourself, show you how you're doing on the bike. But I know I would not be as married to the technology as some people are. Like some people are very, very data dependent. And I think to a fault sometimes that they get distracted from listening to what their body symptoms are telling them. And so, and that's what I do with the people I coach is I'm like, look, you've got these great tools, but you can't use them to the exclusion of everything else, especially body intuition. And so, I would probably, yeah, use like heart rate, same thing. I like, it's often wrong, I find with me, so I can't use it as a huge, measuring stick for me. Um, but I tell everybody, use these things to help you, but not to define you or whatever. And it's very funny. I was never a type A person, which is unusual in triathlon. And most of the people I coach are much more disciplined and analytical and
Karen, that doesn't jive with me at all because I thought a requirement to be on Team Psycho was you had to be not only a type A but like type A to the extreme of the extreme. All the people I've met from Team Psycho are off the charts. So that doesn't I don't buy it. I don't buy that you're not type A in some way.
You can ask anybody that knows me. I mean, one thing, do you know what my normal wake up time is? And this is like even right now. So, most how many triathletes do you know that sleep till 9:30 a.m. most mornings?
Well, now I know one. Now I know
And
one.
that, you can't claim that that's a type A person.
That is not a
So,
Team Psycho mentality. I can tell you from the
I'm an original Team Psycho person. So
Team Psycho folks that I know. That is, you are an odd duck in that group.
the entire sport of triathlon is that I would say 90% are more not like me. But it is possible to, one of these days I'm gonna write a book about how to survive as a type Z in a type A world or type A sport.
So along those same lines, Ken, like how do you talked about sort of that type A triathlon person, but how have you seen triathlon change over the years, specifically here in New England from the Bud Light days?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it used to be a smaller, tighter community for sure. I mean, back in the day, if you saw another bike with aero bars on there, you'd be like, "Hey, do you do triathlon too?" You'd immediately become friends because it was such a small world, and you would probably see them at every race because there was the New England Triathlon Series, and everybody did each New England Triathlon Series race. So it was, yeah, a little bit, like I said, more camaraderie just because everybody knew everybody. So I would say, then there was a huge expansion where there were tons of races every weekend, and there was you could get everything from a kind of grassroots race like the Firm series used to put on races that cost $50 to do the race, whereas it's hard. There's not that many races that are cheap to enter anymore. It's a kind of an investment. So I think getting in the sport is a little bit more expensive right now. I also think that we went through a little phase where the sport became a little more Ironman focused. Ironman, the company, kind of became the prestigious thing to be a part of. And so a lot of people took up the sport just so they could, have an M dot tattooed on their calf or whatever. And I think that I don't know, it lost a little bit of the grassroots. This is a fun lifestyle to just, dabble in swim, bike, and run and have an event to do on the weekend kind of thing. So it became this like make a bargain with your spouse that you're not going to see me for 6 months because I'm about to embark on a training for an Ironman. And and that is so all encompassing. And so I feel like there's some happy ground somewhere that I wish we had a little more of people that were in it just for kind of a little bit more of a casual lifestyle, that you can do triathlon and still have balance in your life. And it doesn't have to be your whole identity. And you don't have to alienate your boss and your your family and everything to be able to keep the lifestyle up. So I don't know. I mean, I love the goal that people have of doing an Ironman, because I think it is transformative to do something that's that hard and takes that much kind of discipline and uh, dedication. But I wish that that wasn't the only thing that people got in the sport for. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. It's unfortunately you're pointing a finger at me because I was one of those. I didn't get the tattoo. I sort of am not a like. I have my own feelings on that tattoo. But I did it in the same thing, and it was really hard on the family. I had two young kids, and work suffered. But there's some insatiable drive for somebody to want to do that Ironman. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah,
And
no, I understand it. Believe me, I do get it. But I
yeah,
guess I we take there's a group of Team Psycho and that goes every year to the Olympic distance nationals. I just went 2 weeks ago. It was in Atlantic City this year, drivable from New England, and it is such a competitive event. Like you can take that same drive to like complete a really long endurance sport, like an Ironman, and put it into getting faster at the Olympic distance. But you can do that in 10 hours of training a week and still improve and get better, rather than having to do the 14 to 20 or whatever people put into an Ironman. And it's just a little bit, it's a different type of dedication. It's like you got to be willing to go hard and push yourself for for quality. And I'm not kidding. The older age groups at that race, because I go to announce at it, and I've been announcing for maybe 10, 12 years, and maybe even more than that. But if you look at the age groups, like from 40 to 44, they give, top 10 for every 5-year age group. There were people sprinting to the finish in the 70 to 74-year-old men's category. The top three were a minute of each other, racing to the finish line. And in the, 10 years ago, there might have only been a half dozen people that could even finish. So like, and the people that are into that distance, they go home and they're like, wow, I was 11th at age 69. Next year, I'm going to be 70. And if I, can do that well, I will be top five. And so they, for a full year, go home super motivated. And it's been happening for 10, 20 years that every year people are like more motivated because they see when they get older, they move into an easier age group. And so they're like stoked. But it's just made all the age groups get so incredibly strong. I mean, people are doing things at that. A woman won overall, the 45 to 49-year-old won the whole race this year for the sprint distance. That never used to happen. People thought you were over the hill at 36, So I think that's one of the biggest legacies our sport has, is it's shown that as you age, if you stay with it, you do not have to fall the way people think you have to fall. And you can even get better, especially if you took it up at a later age.
Well, Karen, my wife and I went to the USA Triathlon Nationals for Olympic and Sprint when it was in Burlington, Vermont.
Yes, that's the first year I commentated.
Yeah, and the first year, 45 plus, my wife qualified for Worlds.
Yeah.
And then I came back the next year and qualified for Worlds for London.
Yeah.
But I was blown away because some of these guys I met, they were training, a lot, 15 to 20 hours a week. We both just had young kids at the time. We were in like probably the 6 to 10 hour category,
Uh-huh.
getting trained by Janda Riki Munn.
Oh, yeah.
and doing your classes on Wednesdays.
Right?
But I'm not sure we could qualify nowadays. It seems a lot more competitive, but who knows?
Yeah, no, yeah, but that's what's fun. I mean, so, getting to qualify and go to the world championships, it's a super like good goal and fun. So I have a lot of people that's kind of what they train for, and most of them have kids, so it fits in their life to be doing this kind of training and still have time for their kids and, or work, part-time work, whatever they have. And they're top of the, we have some New Englanders that are world champions at the Olympic distance in their age group, right from here. Jess Holmes, Ginger Reiner, Steve Bosick is national champion, has finished top 5 in the world. So a lot of people right from this area that are like top of their age group.
Let's go to the other side because
Okay.
we're talking about fast people as they get older. And what I'd love to know about is the kids triathlon that you're doing, and how are we getting that younger group of kids into that triathlon and making that fun, and not letting the type A parents that are trying to push their kids into triathlon to make it not fun, right? Like I was not a very good, but I was a competitive cross country skier. And I remember when I first took my kids out cross country skiing, I was like, let's go. We're going hard. We're going to go ski fast. And my wife, who's from Sweden, was like, this is not what we do. We bring cinnamon buns and we bring hot chocolate and we make this fun for the kids. You have just made this not fun. So
Yeah.
how are you making a really hard, challenging event like a triathlon fun and exciting for those kids?
Yeah. So, well, we put on this, and I should correct you because I wasn't the founder. There was the nurse at the Lincoln School was a triathlete, and it was her idea to start this kids triathlon. As she did bring me on to the very first board to put it on. So I was involved with it from the beginning, but I consider her the
What was
founder.
her name?
Her name is Karen Cowles, Cowles, and she's since has moved to Colorado. And when she moved, I was like, I got to keep this going. So she was there for the first maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe even more than that. I don't know. It's now, I think we just had our 20th anniversary race.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. So our race, it's very much geared towards kids that have probably never done anything like that before. And, we say our mission is to teach kids to lead healthy, active lives and to tackle things that are hard and challenging, not be afraid to challenge themselves. And for most kids, this really fits the bill. It's like if they've never done an event where you have to swim, bike, and run in a row, most of the kids can swim and they can bike and they can run, but it becomes a whole different challenge to put all three together and to enter a race, where they're committing to something. So it's for ages 5 to 14, and we do give every kid a medal at the finish line, which I know sometimes there's that controversy about rewarding mediocrity or something, but these kids do deserve a medal for completing the race. And then we do still do awards for the top 3, but we really focus on just every kid doing the best that they can. And, we keep it fun, have music and lots of, we have a bouncy house. We have lots of, snacks and food at the end and giveaways with a lot of raffle prizes. And yeah, so we just try and make it a very kind of low key community event.
My kids did it about 10 years ago, I think, when they were 6 and 8. And one thing, we had no idea what to expect, but we were excited to see that we were swimming in a swimming pool.
Yes. Yeah.
And doing a couple of laps or however, based on age. And then, the bike was sort of close by the school, and then the run was sort of around the field. So you could actually, the parents could watch, and it really resonated with me. And my kids loved it. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for doing
It
that.
is pretty amazing though, watching sometimes the parents just beam with pride. Like, there's something about watching your kid do something, especially when you know that they're working kind of hard and like you must see yourself in them or something, because I was the same thing. The first time I ever saw my daughter when she was like 4 or 5, she announced she was doing a little kids race at the beginning of a triathlon that I was doing. And that was the day before. And she must have been talking to somebody. And she's like, I'm doing the kids race. And I was like, oh, it's a full mile, Jen. Have you ever done that before? And she's like, I don't care. I'm doing it, And when I ever saw like her, she's all sweaty in her face, but she has this little look of determination on her face and is not giving in. And I swear to God, I thought my heart was going to burst with just the emotion of it all, So I totally understand the parents, getting into it with their kid, but it is so hard to learn to also take a step back and be like, let the kid do it at the level that they want to do it at. Don't start projecting your, wishes for them and start, like you said, turning it into, a competitive thing when they just are exploring and doing things for fun. And yeah, it's so hard. Yeah, I mean, my daughter eventually became a soccer player, and we ended up joining this club soccer thing for her, and not really knowing what we were getting into. But pretty soon they're like at age 12 and they're flying her to Chicago for competitions. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, there's plenty of competition right here in Western, Massachusetts. But so it is easy for the corporate kind of, I don't know,
Just monetizing everything.
built up around making money off the kids, than the parents that are willing to pay more money to have their kids be better. It's a hard thing to combat. It really is. Because if you don't do it, they don't get recruited for college. And, now college is the way to continue on the sport. So I don't have an easy answer, but.
Well, I think there was a lesson in there, Karen, when you were talking about the kids and you were saying, hey, you just got to let them come and enjoy it and have a good time. And I'm just thinking, is there some words and wisdom in there, not for the kids, but what about the adults or the young adults that are thinking about their first triathlon? Because it is intimidating. So what would be that advice for the runners or the cyclists or the open water swimmers that we've got listening to the podcast about doing their first triathlon? Talk them off the ledge.
Yeah. Well, if they really need to ease into it, I'm like, do a relay, like, just go to an event and you'll see the people that are doing the whole thing. And you don't have to commit yet, just do the portion that you're used to and you'll see what it's all about. Do the bike portion with another swimmer if you're worried about the swim, but watch the swim and see what, kind of people are out there breaststroking along and how there's kayakers lining the course and that, it's safe. And, because a lot of times people in their mind have built it up into, the only person I know that does triathlon is this really fit person that has, a $10,000 bike and, trains 20 hours a week. But, there are people that do it on a, where you don't need that kind of commitment just to get started. And I also say, sometimes I'll tell people that, in the beginning, those first 9 years of my life, and that when I said I do triathlons professionally, and even after I'd like won the world championships, they'd be like, oh, so you do that one in Hawaii? And I'm like, no, I do the other distances that aren't in Hawaii. And they're like, oh, that doesn't count, kind of thing. Or I've had people say, I do swim, bike, run, but I don't do the Ironman. So I'm not a triathlete. I'm like, if you do a sprint triathlon, you are a triathlete. It counts, And so I think too many people like equate triathlon with Ironman, and it's not. So, a sprint triathlon is a great way to get started. Do a small grassroots one that, is going to have a lot of first timers. If you're a female, I tell people do the Title IX race. It's all women. So it doesn't have the threat of men crawling over you on zipping by you on the bike. And some races have things like swim angels. Someone will stay with you to escort you on the swim if you're nervous. There's all kinds of ways to accommodate people that are nervous about their first time. Sometimes there's a first timers wave that you'll be all with other people that are doing it for the first time, so there's ways to get into it that intimidation can be mitigated for sure.
My hidden gem for the newbie triathlete out there, I don't know if it's still going on, but it used to be called the New London Hospital Days Triathlon up in New London, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
and it was like an ultra sprint, and it was super fun and very low key. Karen, you've had a chance to cycle and train and run all over the country. Why do you think New England is the greatest region in the world for endurance sports?
Well, I think it just has it all, So, yeah, think of you can get to 6 states so easily. You can bike in all these different states just being in one little area. Um,
And you mentioned at the beginning that there are seasons, so there's
yeah.
time for an off season, which I love that answer.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's nothing like when spring finally rolls around in this area and everybody's been cooped up indoors, either, at Fast Bliss classes or on Zwift or in their basement or whatever. And the first nice day comes and you just see joy written on people's faces as they're out biking around. It's like you catch someone's eye as they bike by and the feeling's the same. They're like, isn't this awesome? And whereas we lived in California and you have that every day, you just take it for granted after a while, right? So I feel like you're reborn every spring here with a new appreciation for being able to get outside and feel the air in your face and the sun on your back. And at the same time, you also sometimes you have to deal with crappy weather, and that makes you tougher, right? So if you ever encounter bad weather in a race, you're like, "Yep, I've done this before. I live in New England." So
Exactly.
whether it's humidity or cold weather or raw or whatever, yeah. So you pretty much get it all. We're not pampered here.
That's good, Karen. That's a great answer, and we agree. We agree with you 100%. Before we close out, anything that you'd like to mention, like to plug to our listeners, please. This is a great opportunity.
Well, just if you're ever interested in some indoor biking with other people, come check out the Fast Blitz Copy Trainer Studio. Starting in mid-October, usually I'll start coaching classes during most weeknights and pass along some of the tips I've learned over the last 30 odd years of doing this thing. And you get to meet other cyclists too. It's a fun way to just have a little camaraderie during the depths of winter.
Sounds like it could be the new singles hangout, though, from what we heard at the beginning of this conversation. So it's a date night. Don't go out to dinner. Go do some indoor compu training. I mean, nothing says love like that. So.
I used to have a Friday morning where I had 3 couples that all attended at the same time. Then they'd go out for breakfast after.
Oh, that's great.
What city and state does that occur in, and what time of year does it start?
This is in Needham, Mass. And it's, I think they're probably going to be starting out October, the Columbus Day, whatever that is, like the weekend of the 13th, I believe.
Got it. Well, Karen Smyers, thank you so much for being on the New England Endurance Podcast and sharing your incredible story and your journey into triathlon and beyond, and your contributions to the community. For those that want to learn more about the Kids Triathlon, we're going to post that in our show notes. It's kidstri.net. And also, if you want to know more about Karen and her coaching services, it's karensmyers.com. We're going to tag all that on our Instagram page at New England Endurance.
Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure. Keep getting those stories out there. I love it.
Oh, we will. And we'd love to say thanks to all our sponsors who power this podcast. We've got Lark Fine Foods, a 100% woman-owned specialty food company baking delicious small batch cookies. And I will say the chief operating officer, aka the husband at Lark Fine Foods, is a multiple Ironman and multiple other distance triathlete that I've done many races with, and I know he'll be listening. He also knows many of the same Team Psycho type A crazy knuckleheads that we both know and we're winking about on this podcast. So, of course, The Everyday Athlete, a book about balancing work, family, and fitness. There should be a foreword that somebody who has won Ironman triathlon, Ironman world champion should write, because there is no way to do an Ironman if you can't balance work, family, and fitness. And of course, the Kinetic, which is experience the brain boosting benefits of ketones on demand that taste great, at drinkkinetic.com. And until next time, get out there, rain or shine, no matter what the season, explore the beautiful terrain of New England.